And reaction is pouring in over the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar as leaders weigh in on what it might mean for the Israel-Hamas war.
Bradley Blackburn joins us now with more from New York. We do want to warn our viewers that some of the images in this next story may be disturbing.
Rockets fired towards Israel Friday night could be seen from Lebanon, hours after Hezbollah announced a new phase in its fight with Israel. It comes a day after Israeli troops killed Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar in Gaza. President Biden addressed both conflicts after meeting with allies in Germany.
We think that there's a possibility of working for a ceasefire in Lebanon, and it's going to be harder in Gaza, but we agree that there has to be an outcome. What happens the day after?
Sinwar was the chief architect of the October 7th terror attacks. Israel had been hunting for him for more than a year, but in the end, IDF soldiers killed him by chance during a firefight in southern Gaza. U.S. officials called his death an inflection point.
With Sinwar's killing yesterday, that there's a unique opportunity here for us all to kind of grab hold of to see what we can do to end the war.
Family members of hostages also expressed hope.
Now we have a real chance to find a way to seal a deal.
But among the rubble in Gaza, Palestinians mourned Sinwar's death during Friday prayers. And a Hamas deputy chief said Friday it will not return hostages until there's a ceasefire and Israeli forces withdraw. Bradley Blackburn, CBS News, New York.
And joining us now to discuss these latest developments is Oakland University professor Peter Trumbore. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So, before we get to what this might mean for the war in Gaza and negotiations, how big of a deal is this? Can you put into context just how significant the death of Sinwar is?
Sure. So he was the Hamas commander in Gaza. Unlike a lot of the other top leaders of Hamas, he had stayed in Gaza. He had that was his base of operations, and he was primarily a military commander. After the Israeli assassination of the leader of the political sort of side of Hamas earlier this year, Sinwar took on that role as well. So in terms of sort of the leadership structure of Hamas, Sinwar was an incredibly important target. That said, one of the things that we know about terrorist organizations like Hamas is they very easily survive the loss of their top leadership. Hamas has been around for 40 years. It has experienced multiple losses of its top leadership at the hands of Israel. And at each moment when that has occurred, it has actually bounced back stronger. And so that is, in fact, a common pattern with organizations like Hamas that are national liberation focused, that have a religious component to their ideology. Those kinds of terrorist organizations are the most resistant to collapse in the face of what's called leadership decapitation.
Wow.
You mentioned them coming back stronger. That leads me to my next question. This death will, in some cases, provoke some anger and maybe a sense of retaliation. Do you fear that that could be a big problem?
Well, this is always going to be the case, right? An organization like Hamas that still, despite all of the civilian suffering, still retains strong support amongst Palestinians in Gaza. Sinwar will be, added into the pantheon of martyrs, and it's already happened. And certainly Iran, which is Hamas's patron, has vowed that they will avenge his death, just like they have vowed that they will avenge the death of other sort of top Hamas leadership. The reality on the ground is that Hamas is a hierarchically organized organization. There are additional leaders who will step up into that vacuum. While Hamas, the ranks of their fighters has been decimated within Gaza, they continue to be combat operational and combat effective. And so for the longer term, this is unlikely to have any significant impact on Hamas's, but either its existence or its ability to continue to wage war against Israel in the name of Palestinian independence.
So what does this mean for the possibility of a ceasefire or hostage release? And would somebody like Sinwar have had anything to do with those negotiations in the first place?
Yes, he would have. And it's thought that within Gaza, he was less interested in sort of negotiating a ceasefire and a hostage release. The problem we're looking at now is, well, you're right, this does open a potential window. But within the Israeli side, the government there is really quite torn between two very strong, but diametrically opposed positions on this question. You have hardliners in the Israeli government who see the death of Sinwar as an opportunity to sort of finish the job and try to completely eliminate Hamas. You have others who, also within the Israeli government, including in its defense establishment, who see this as an opportunity to re-engage with sort of the next group of Hamas leaders that are going to step up. And it's unclear which side Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is going to come down on. So far, he has been riding sort of the hardline sort of camp. He's been part of that. And so while this does open the possibility, it's unclear to me whether the Israelis will actually step through that door.
Now, there's some people who looked at this and thought maybe this means some kind of end because he's dead. But like you said, they keep evolving and growing. What would you say is the ultimate goal for Israel here, and why keep fighting?
Well, this is part of the problem. It's not entirely clear that Israel knows what its goal is. If the goal is the complete elimination of Hamas as a political force in Gaza, that's simply not going to happen. In fact, what their response has done, what the Israeli war in Gaza has done, is to in fact increase sympathy for Hamas, not just in Gaza, but around the world. And this was part of the Hamas strategy, right? To provoke such an Israeli overreaction that it would increase the sympathy for the Palestinian cause and draw more attention to it. And it would start to weaken the connection between Israel and its Western allies. And we have seen that. We've seen that happening in the United States. We've seen that happening across Western Europe. So, you know, what this means for the long term, it's really hard to say, right? If Israel's goal is the complete destruction of Hamas, I think that's a pipe dream.
I mean, is it an ideology as much as it is an organization with a finite number of people?
Yes, absolutely right. As long as the aspirations of the Palestinian people to live free and independently, as long as those aspirations persist, there will be organizations like Hamas.
All right. Well, Professor Peter Trumbore from Oakland University, as always, thank you for your expertise.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.